Our committee to order. We are going to continue item 3 and item 4. I'm also going to ask that we continue item 7 and ask the CAO to report back at the next meeting with the following. An analysis of the Bureau of Contract Administration report, because it does not identify funding sources for position authorities requested for the current year or for additional money requested for community outreach. And also an analysis of the contract administration request to include authorization for future position authority and funding in fiscal years 2016-17, 17-18, and 18-19, because the authority can't be given for future years as these requests would be considered during the annual budget process. So if we could ask that that item be continued to our next meeting with that information coming back. And now I'd like to start with item number 1.
Item number 1, City Controller Report relative to operational data published by the Department of Animal Services.
Actually, while you're coming up, I'm going to start with public comment. I have no public comment cards. Seeing no public comment cards. Okay, I'm going to briefly do, wait, that's just for item 1. So there are no general public comments. I possess none. Does anybody possess them? Number eight. Cards for 8 and 9 and 1. So there are no.
I gave them to him. Item 1.
Yes.
And general.
Item 1 isn't general public comment, though. So seeing no general public comment cards,
I just gave you.
I'll give you another few seconds to find it.
I'll be glad to do another one, but this is.
I have one for item 9. Oh, I'm sorry, it was buried in the wrong pile. All right, one general comment from Dan.
Come on, guys. This has created trouble before, so thank you.
And you'll have 1 minute general public comment.
Garbage in, garbage out. I provided to the panel an email from Monique Earle at Ron Galperin's office, who said that their audit was limited in scope and doesn't cover wrongdoing or misuse of funds. So the problem is the city has danced around the problem areas. Here it is from Monique Earle, September 9th, 2015. You have a copy. It was limited in scope. The issues you raised pertaining to wrongdoing and misuse of public funds is something the controller takes seriously. So how can you, because Mr. Koretz knows that we provided 72 pages of wrongdoing and misuse of public funds to the controller's office. So whatever you're going to discuss for item 1 doesn't cover wrongdoing and misuse of public funds. So it's a garbage in, garbage out exercise. Only an external comprehensive audit will really deliver results. Thank you.
All right, so item number 1.
Good morning, Cynthia Varela with the Controller's Office. I'm here to present our audit report, Every Animal Counts, operational data published by the Department of Animal Services. This report was issued September 3rd, 2015. The overall objective of this audit was to assess and validate the completeness, relevance, and reliability of animal services data collection, the sources for that data, and the accuracy of currently reported statistics, given our prior audit recommendations related to data accuracy. Our audit reviewed data reported by the department during fiscal years 2011, 2012-13, and 2013-14. Overall, we found the data publicly reported by Animal Services to be relatively accurate, except for minor differences in impound and outcome statistics. We found 1.3% overstated in both categories over a 3-year period. and there was a significant undercount of spay-neuter surgeries that resulted in a 41% understatement of certain animal sterilizations paid for by the department. There were system and process deficiencies that, if left unresolved, could result in significant errors over time. We also noted that the department does not report additional data, such as animal age and health conditions, that other animal control and welfare organizations report. The key issues we noted in this report include animal services lack sufficient processes to ensure reported statistics are accurate. Their impound and outcome statistics are inadvertently overstated due to computer system limitations and departmental procedures. This resulted in an estimated 2,200 impound and outcome records that were potentially duplicated and miscategorized. This was over a 3-year period. We noted data entry errors can occur, resulting in inaccurate reporting of what happens to animals. We also noted animal sterilization statistics are underreported. In 2014, the department did not report 5,300 sterilizations performed on shelter animals by partner veterinarians and 4,000 sterilizations performed on privately owned animals by a contracted mobile veterinarian. Our second key finding, animal services published operational reports do not include details related to animal impound and outcome statistics that other comparable animal control organizations report. We found that other organizations provide additional details related to impound and outcome statistics, such as the age of the animals in the shelters and the health of the animals adopted, rescued, or euthanized. We noted the department provides numerous statistics related to its operations and animal outcomes and has refined its reports over time. However, a lack of standardized reporting limits the ability to compare and assess performance with other animal welfare organizations. The department submitted an action plan for implementing the 6 audit recommendations. Based on the department's October 2015 action plan, we considered 1 recommendation to be implemented and 4 recommendations to be in progress. The department disagreed with recommendation 2.1 related to adopting a standardized reporting model to produce animal welfare statistics and metrics that are widely accepted by other animal welfare organizations. I want to make clear that the intention of the recommendation was not to replace the report, their WFSTAT report that they prepare, but to enhance that report. And that's our presentation.
And I wonder if we could get a response from the department to the audit.
Good morning. Dana Brown, Animal Services Department. Okay, so the department did, as indicated, turn in a action plan for the implementation of the 6 recommendations made based on the findings of the audit. To date, 2 of the 6 are completely implemented, which is the department is now changing the way that we report spay-neuter surgeries to reflect the actual surgeries performed by the submissions for payment entered into the online vet portal. So we are now including both contract vet clinics as well as vets who are under letters of agreement. So we have implemented that completely. The other thing is that recommendation 1.5 is that the department consider reporting the numbers of sterilization surgeries performed by the mobile vet clinics within the WFSTAT reports, and we have included that into WFSTAT. Recommendation 2.1, which speaks to the Asilomar Accords method of reporting statistics, the department feels like that model is not the best model for the Los Angeles population because there is a degree of subjectivity. The department feels very strongly that to maintain the transparency that we should continue with our noses in, noses out, very standard way of reporting our life save rate. And so we have not moved forward on that recommendation. Recommendation 1.1 has to do with establishing processes that would validate our WFSTAT data. We have had some problems in the past, as they have indicated. Even though it's less than 2%, any opportunity we have to improve, we do want to move forward with that. The department looked into working with the vendor to upgrade the system. We were in the middle of a system upgrade at the time anyway, so it was a good time to have a conversation with the vendor to see if there was any available feature that would detect reporting anomalies. And frankly, the response was that the best way to detect reporting anomalies is by our own eyes and by our own ways of rechecking data to say this doesn't look like it's right, and look into it a little bit more. So the department is moving forward with writing SOPs that do that very thing, that require supervisors to look at the data a little more closely before it is input. Also with the systems team, as they prepare the WFSTAT report, to look at the data more critically, to identify this low percentage of anomalies, but anomalies nonetheless. Which actually kind of dovetails into recommendation 1.2 that has to do with animal outcomes and developing an SOP to handle animal outcomes so that the outcome numbers will be, because that's mostly where the issues were in terms of the anomalies that were found. It was the outcome numbers. And what happens is that sometimes animals come in one way and then they leave a different way. And sometimes they get recategorized, which double counts them. And so we are putting together SOPs so that this no longer happens. And then the last thing had to do with reading our WFSTAT report and formally defining each of the statistics that are reported in WFSTAT, data sources, category definitions, and the department is actually, they're using me because still in my fairly new status as an animal services department member, I have like sort of a set of eyes that kind of says, what is that? What does that mean? It's not as obvious as you might think it is. So we're using that to be able to create a separate document that we will make available online so that it's easy to understand what our statistics mean, how we do our formulas, so that anybody who's looking at them can make the appropriate comparisons and be able to read the information for what it is.
Thank you. We've gotten a couple of complaints from the community that this audit was done too narrowly and mostly focused on statistics. Are there ways that this could have been done more broadly or should have been done? Or how do you feel about your selection of items to review?
Well, this was, the scope of the audit was at the discretion of the controller. And the determination was that we would look at the statistics and ensure that there were adequate processes and controls in place that provide assurance to the public that they can trust the information that's being publicly reported. And given our prior audits that were done, there were several recommendations related to data accuracy. These were the risks that the controller's office felt we needed to look into.
Thank you. Just for the record, I've been joined on this item by my colleagues, Mr. Rue and Mr. Harris-Dawson. Either of you have comments or questions? If not, we have one speaker from the public.
May I clarify one thing on the department's response to recommendation 2.1?
Certainly.
I just want to clarify for the committee's purpose. Our recommendation did not specifically state that the department needed to adopt the Asilomar reporting model, but more that they look at the additional categories of information and statistics that are being reported and look to that to make them a little bit more in line with other organizations so that some comparisons can be made. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. I don't know if the department has done that yet or is planning to.
I will make a note of that and speak to Ms. Barnett about it to see if we might be able to do something that's a little more in line with that, but less like a Asilomar.
Okay. We have one speaker on this item. Dan?
Okay. As you can see, the representative from the controller's office didn't answer the question. In the document that Mr. Galperin and Mr. Wesson specifically solicited from me, I showed them how the city of Los Angeles, between 2009 and 2014, falsified 8,707 pet adoptions. They moved, they know the city took animals from the city shelters, put them in another city building in cages, and called them adoptions. Now, let me know when sitting in a cage in a government building is an adoption. It was only after I filed with the clerk's office a letter to Mr. Galperin proving it with the city's own statistics. Now, how is that red flag not brought up and looked into? It wasn't looked into falsifying 8,807 adoptions. How is that not within the realm of something to be looked into? Furthermore, we have documented fraud with internal emails from best friends showing that there are hand-generated impound numbers to show that our $19 million shelter is being misused. That shelter is only from animals from within the city shelter. Here's an internal communication between a supervisor and best friends showing hand-generated impound numbers. Not looking into that is malpractice.
Thank you. If there's no further questions or comments, we will note and file the controller's report without objection. Item number 2. Oh, and I should note that item number 5, without objection, will go on consent. So anybody here for that item, you can feel free to depart. Item number 2.
Item number 2, City Controller Report relative to city's graying workforce.
Good morning, Farid Safar from Controller's Office.
Yes.
There are 2 reports attached to the documents that you have before you. One is the data mining report, and the other one is the graying workforce. I would provide some overview on data mining for you today. And Controller representative is here to discuss the graying workforce. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, if you could please walk us through your report.
Okay. We issued our data mining report on October 20. Our primary objective was to analyze and provide transparency on overtime, bonuses, and other payroll expenses paid to the employee during calendar year 2014. During that time, City paid over $3.6 billion in direct payroll expenses, an additional $862 million in the first quarter of calendar year 2015. The City Controller issued a paycheck to 45,844 unique employees, of which 36,685 were full-time and 9,199 were part-time personnel or seasonal. This amount reflects the gross earning of the city employees, including the salaries, bonuses, and overtime. Does not include city-paid employee benefit or pension contribution. To put it in perspective, 44% of this $3.6 billion payroll was paid to sworn employees, specifically $1 billion for police and $519 million for fire, with the remaining $2 billion paid to civilian employees. As of December 2014, 29% of city employees had a regular annual salary of $100,000 or more. And during the same time period, 15,700 employees actually earned over $100,000, including salaries, bonuses, and overtime. That included 3,106 who earned over $150,000, 774 earned over $200,000. Some of the key observations that we had with regard to the overtime were that the overtime was paid approximately, the overtime that was paid was approximately $330 million or 9% of the total payroll. Paid overtime has increased 62% over the last 3 years, from $204 million in 2004 to $245 million in 2013 to $330 million in 2014. While the number of authorized city staff remained flat. Over 1,600 city employees, including sworn fire and police, were paid more than $50,000 in overtime in 2014. That was up from 834 employees in 2012. An additional 4.5 million overtime hours with an estimated value of $53 million were earned and banked by employees to be taken as compensated time off or to be paid at a later date. Over 1,300 civilian employees with a regular annual salary exceeding $100,000 also earned overtime and were paid a total of $14 million in overtime payments during that period. Salary employees who make less than $105,590 qualify for overtime pay currently based on city admin code. With regard to bonuses, city paid for the temporary and permanent bonuses paid in 2014 was about $140 million, or 4% of the total payroll. 65% of all city employees receive a bonus. 17% of the employees receive at least 3 bonus types at some point during the year. City paid on average $33 million annually in temporary bonuses to more than 90 different bonus codes, $106 million in permanent bonuses through 159 bonus codes. Permanent bonuses add to the employee's pay rate, therefore they are pensionable, and therefore they also impact the city's contribution to our pension obligation, which extends far into the future. We also noted over 130 civilian employees that were paid 40 or more hours of overtime for at least 13 pay period during the year. This number increased from 75 employees in 2012. The 13 pay period represents about six months during any fiscal year. And there were 125 employees who were not police officers that received more than 1 salary step increase within 6 months. Our report also included several suggestions for management and policymaker consideration, that the overtime should be monitored to ensure overtime hours are in line with the expected performance goals, to identify instances where hiring newer staff may be more cost-effective, and to identify safety concerns and any indication of potential time abuse. We also suggested that the policymakers should consider the impact of bonuses during labor contract negotiation, since they are significant, and as I said, they would impact pension contribution in the future if they are permanent bonuses. We suggested to management that they conduct periodic review of payroll information to make sure that payroll expenses are in accordance with the job assignments and MOUs. And we also suggested that city policymakers should consider step increases based on performance instead of automatic step increases to recognize high performers. And that summarizes our report.
Now, you didn't, well, first let me ask on overtime, why do you think the significant increase in overtime occurred in the last 3 years?
Generally because of the city's inability to hire during the hiring freeze. That was the main contributor that increased the percentage of the overtime. Work had to be done regardless of whether the staff is available.
So as opposed to an abuse of overtime or bad policies, it was mostly just a shortage of staff.
Generally, yes, it is, yes.
And this audit, I know, also focused on the high percentage of folks that are going to retire in the next few years. I wonder if you have information on, because I know we're in the next few years we have a high number of people that are going to retire. If you have information on how quickly people actually retire in reality when they hit the number that they could retire, and whether that's been changing in the last few years. Because obviously we have to deal with succession planning with the high number of potential retirees. But a secondary question is, how many people do we actually think will retire, or will retire in a year or 5 years? What's the general pattern been?
Well, sir, my name's Ted Rorlick. I'm also with the Controller's Office, and I'm here to answer questions specifically about the graying of the workforce. Unfortunately, I don't have a comprehensive answer to your question. What we do know is that the average age of retirement in the city is not immediate. It's 62, and that's not far off from national norms. That would be 2 years after most people reach the normal retirement age in the city of 60. Of course, you can retire early at 55. So there's no evidence that people retire as quickly as they're eligible, but we were suggesting that, according to the statistics from Lacers and the two other pension funds, that this is a blooming problem, and urging that the council order departments, not simply request, that the departments engage in serious succession planning.
How do you think we're doing at this point in terms of succession planning?
When I last looked, which was back in October, I noted that several of the departments had voluntarily engaged in succession planning. ITA seemed to be very active, and can't recall the other departments, but there were just a few.
Yeah, I'm Michael Gold with the Personnel Department,
Beg your pardon.
and we're helping to oversee the succession planning efforts, and we've created a program for all departments to participate. So far, 25 to 30 departments have begun the process of creating succession plans. 5 departments have completed their plans, and the real work has begun in implementing some of that action steps to improve recruitment, selection, training, and knowledge capture, knowledge transfer, all of the things they need to do to prepare for this imminent attrition.
And how much do we think personnel itself could potentially be a bottleneck in addressing this in terms of being caught up with exams, in terms of having enough staff, et cetera?
Well, I think Personnel Department is putting a lot of resources into making sure it's part of the solution and not the problem. I think they've developed innovative ways to improve the selection process, make it more efficient. They've been able to hire more staff. So I don't believe it's a bottleneck, but more of making things more efficient and thinking of better ways of doing things.
Mr. Chair, I could also add, you may recall last year during the budget discussions, the council discussed the need for succession planning and actually added resources, this year being the first year. And it was going to take some time to look at succession planning, expediting the exam process. So I think this is the first year that the Personnel Department has had an opportunity to really concentrate efforts in those areas.
Yeah, I just have some concerns that we're still not adequately staffed up, and so I'd encourage the Personnel Department not to be shy, and rather than just being a team player and saying, well, everybody's got to continue to take hits, if there are areas where you think you're going to slow the process, I'd encourage you to raise your hand and not just say, okay, we'll do a little bit here and a little bit there.
Sir, I would point out that the Personnel Department itself, according to Lacers data, 45% of the current staff would be eligible to retire in 2 years from now.
Right, and obviously if that happened, that would be somewhat of a disaster that would exacerbate this problem if we don't look at it aggressively.
Tom Aldis, General Manager with Lacers. Other than the year where we had the early retirement program, typically when a member is eligible for a full unreduced retirement, about 14% of the members that are actually eligible in that given year actually do retire that year. So the pool has gotten bigger over the last few years of people who are eligible, so the numbers of retirees have gone up. Last year we retired about 700 members, which was our largest year, other than the early retirement program year. But it's about 14% for members who are eligible for a full retirement. For those that are eligible for only a reduced retirement, it's about 4% per year that actually retire. And I think that there are a number of factors, I don't know all of them, that weigh in as to whether folks retire. We are seeing that our members are retiring with a couple less years of service than they had historically, and whether that's the increased contribution rate that members are now paying, and they're factoring that into their retirement decision, whether it's having to do more with less, whether it's the favorable stock markets that we've had the last few years. It's probably a combination of those and other factors as to whether people actually retire.
Questions, comments, colleagues? Mr. Rue?
Did you just say that 14% of eligible retirees retire?
In any given year.
In any
So
given
you have a pool, and some of
About
those,
6% of total.
and then the pool grows the next year by some other members becoming eligible, and then reduced by some retiring out.
Yeah, you know, when I saw this report, 46% of, in 2 years, of our employees being eligible to retire. I mean, this is an alarming report, and I fully concur with the chair. The need for a succession planning, a capacity building. It's not just hiring, but it's also a transfer of knowledge. So as the chair says, whatever we could do to speed up, promote not just hiring, but also transfer of knowledge, continuing education, regardless of what department it is. But I just had a quick question. It might not be direct to this report, but what's the pension cost of the 14% that does retire, and what kind of fiscal impact are we looking at on the pension side? Can someone answer that? Or
We plan to fund a member's pension from the time they walk in the door. And so between the member's contribution, the city's contribution, and the investment return, if we meet all of our actuarial assumptions, that member's pension is funded. So there isn't an impact other than if members decide to retire earlier and collect their pension for longer, that can have a bit of an impact on the pension fund. But otherwise, we plan for their retirement from the day they walk in the city door.
so even though it's a large potential retiree population, you're saying on the pension side we're okay?
We're okay because we've been pre-funding their pension, and not only their pensions, but we're relatively unique in pre-funding their retiree health care benefits as well. We're one of the few jurisdictions that does that.
Can you give a rough dollar figure of the current pension and what it could potentially look like a year and 2 years from now, assuming like a 14% retiree rate?
I don't have information going forward because we don't project that out. But right now, we pay pensions approximately $750 million a year in pensions and close to another $100 million a year in retiree health care costs.
Okay. Well, like I said, this is a potential crisis, but with every crisis, there's an opportunity. We look forward. I look forward to working with you guys to see how we could use this opportunity to further train and grow our workforce. Thank you.
And just for the record, in our last agreements with our employees and with the coalition of city unions, there also was an agreement to restaff back up and add back an additional 5,000 employees. I'm somewhat skeptical that with a high number of retirements, that if we aren't aggressive enough, that we actually make much progress in that direction. So again, my concern with abilities to have an adequately staffed personnel department and enough ability to actually staff back up as we've agreed to do, along with all of the retirements. Mr. Harris-Dawson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate you bringing this issue forward, and thank you all for the work that you've done. I concur with both the comments of the chair and my colleague, Mr. Rue. I had a couple questions about math and then a couple questions about logistics. So when we get a number that says 46% in 2 years, does that anticipate a 14% retirement rate of the people who are eligible to retire with full benefits, or does it just assume all the people in the previous year retire?
It assumes no retirements. It's the number that is currently eligible. And then what we do is to help departments plan for departures of staff at Lacers. We send out a report every August to the departments, letting them know who's currently eligible and who will be eligible in the next 2 years. So it's just the gross total number of employees who will be eligible in those years, because we can't predict who may or may not retire. So the pool grows each year simply because more people become eligible in our report.
So the number of 46% is a top end. That's as high as
That's
it
the
could
maximum
possibly
number
go.
of civilians
Okay,
that would
right.
be eligible to retire.
Okay. And then when throughout these documents, when the term eligible to retire is used, that means retire with full benefits.
I would defer to the writers of the report on that.
I believe it's, taxing my memory, but I believe it's eligible for its early or normal retirement are included. So you're right, it's a maximum number.
Okay. So it would be great at some point, Mr. Chair, to get something like a projection that's, or at least a range that's more in line with at least what we've seen in the past. In other words, assuming that people retire at the rate that they've been retiring, it's not 46%, then it's whatever percentage that works out to be. And then maybe a range in there gives us some sense. I mean, as someone who's done a little bit of study in organizational management, the idea that you'd introduce a third of your population would be new within 5 years is a little bit frightening. I mean, we went through this with LAPD in the early 1990s, and we had, many believe, a consent decree as one of the results of that. And so, and there's studies all over, organizations all over the world. So I'm just a little bit concerned that we aren't screaming a little louder about this, because that's a big influx and outflow of people, institutional memory, and a whole bunch of other things.
I would encourage, as you do that you might want to look at even a little further, because as the city hires in waves, we do have a big wave of potential retirees going through right now, but right behind that it's a much smaller wave. So you might want to take a little longer term view in that study. So.
That's it. Thank you.
And one other thing we might look at as we lose a lot of information and an ability is a focus on having some folks willing to come back on 90-day contracts to do some training if that's necessary. Obviously, if we can hire people ahead of the wave and train them with people that have the institutional knowledge, that would be the ideal. But I wouldn't be afraid to rely on bringing some folks back as well. Let's see, we have one member of the public to speak as well, Dan Gust.
Thank you. I'm amazed at the level and degree of the detail in this item as opposed to the one from the previous where nothing was answered. The detail was phenomenal, and that should tell the public something. You should require the same level of clarity on all agenda items. As some of you know, I have a master's degree in business. I'm the reason why KPMG won a multi-million-dollar CalPERS proposal. And the one question you're not asking and not getting answers is what is the growth assumption of the funds? So as your population gets old, what is the assumed rate of return on the funds you're using for these people? Because you're promising them certain amounts in their retirement, but what is the assumption? What is the rate of return? What are you promising the people? That's the question. If you want to talk about a crisis that's going to come up in a year or two or whenever, as your population gets older and the demands on these funds get bigger, you need to find out the promised rate of return. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no comments or questions, recommendations, I will ask that we note and file the controller's report on this item without objection. Item number 8.
Item number 8, motion Rue Coretz relative to the display of exotic and wild animals in public spaces. This matter has also been referred to the Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee.
And just for the record, we had a council meeting canceled yesterday. I'm not sure that we'll be able to do all 3 of our remaining items without canceling them as well. So This may be the last item of the day.
Good morning, members of the committee. Dov Lascelles, Assistant City Attorney, and with me is Brenda Barnett, General Manager of the Department of Animal Services. Our office has been working with the department on this motion, Councilman Ryu. We are exploring possibilities. This motion contains in it two different concepts. One that seems to be directed more at prohibiting animals on certain sidewalks, parks, etc., to address one concern that the city has in terms of primarily tourist areas, etc., and then a second for locations such as party houses, generally a different type of animal. We're working with the department on both concepts, and we hope to bring something back to the committee within hopefully 30 days for a deeper discussion. And in the interim, we will be meeting with other interested parties as well as members of your staff, Councilman Ryu, to make sure that we are on track.
I wonder if we could have the Department of Animal Services comment on this ordinance.
What we've done to put this committee together with Mr. Lascelles is we've put our Director of Field Services and one of our very experienced lieutenants who's had experience with these type of cases both on the streets and at the party houses are on the committee. And we've also invited several members of the public, some of our activist allies who are very interested in exotic animal legislation to also serve on the committee. So I believe that when they come back to you, and of course we're working with Councilmember Ryu's staff closely, I believe that when they come back to you with a report, it will be representative of what the community and the department feels is our best recommendation.
Councilmember Ryu, this is your motion, so why don't you speak
Thank you,
to
Mr.
it?
Chair. I just really want to thank the City Attorney's Office and Animal Welfare for the tremendous work you guys have been working on this. And I really look forward to the recommendations that are going to come back. I just want to make sure, and I know it's on your radar, when you talk about locations, there's a subcategory of filming, right? So, and I know you're also working with Film LA as well. Because I know this issue first started, and actually I was with Councilmember Koretz at an event when we got a call at a party house where they had a permit for an elephant. And then we sent police, LAPD out there, and they happened to have a filming permit. So this particular party house used the excuse of filming. I don't know if they had a video camera or something like that, or camcorder, but under the auspices of filming, they got a permit, which was very embarrassing for the city. So I really look forward to this ordinance and look for the report back. Thank you.
And I'd certainly suggest that the city attorney consult with Film LA when drafting this ordinance, so we're sure the needs of production companies, et cetera, and all related issues are addressed in the ordinance.
Yes, and we've already contacted Film LA, and we're setting up a meeting with them probably in the next week or so.
Great. And just for the record, Mr. Chair, I fully support filming. We just want to make sure it's not just anybody could walk in from the street and apply for a filming permit. So.
And we're aware of that. And of course, there's a certain amount of tension between what's a legitimate filming permit and what's used as a cover. But we're aware of that, and we're going to try to address that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Mr. Harris Dawson, any comment? We have a number of speakers from the public. They will each have 1 minute on this item, otherwise we'll miss our council meeting. Beginning with Phyllis Doherty, to be followed by Catherine Doyle and Jacqueline Lawson, so you could all feel free to come up.
Phyllis Doherty with Animal Issues Movement. There was no mention at all of California state law and Fish and Wildlife being included in this. And so, again, we're going to make a law in a vacuum according to what people like or want without regard to how it's going to fit into state law. And that's done all the time, and that's why our laws don't work. So you need to insist that whatever is done is then run through with California Wildlife and make sure how this is coordinated with state law and what's actually working in other areas, not just what's on the books. How are they able to enforce what you're writing or what is being proposed?
Thank you. Catherine Doyle.
Hi, my name is Catherine Doyle. I'm the Director of Science, Research, and Advocacy with the Performing Animal Welfare Society. Since 1984, we've been rescuing and giving sanctuary to exotic and wild animals, most of them from the entertainment industry. So I'd just like to express our support and thank you to the council member for presenting this motion. We are in favor, of course, of anything that is going to help and address the plight of captive exotic animals. And, of course, we also hope this is the first step toward a broader way of addressing the issue of animals in entertainment. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacqueline Lawson.
Hi, I'm Deputy City Attorney Jacqueline Lawson. I'm also the neighborhood prosecutor in Hollywood, assigned to Hollywood since May of 2014. Prior to that, I was assigned to the City Attorney's Animal Protection Unit. I prosecuted probably over 100 to 200 animal cruelty neglect cases. In my current assignment, I am the specially assigned prosecutor to handle the party houses in the Hollywood Hills. In the past year and a half, as the neighborhood prosecutor, I've noticed a proliferation of animals appearing at parties as props: elephants, baby giraffes, lions. As anyone knows who's been up to the Hollywood Hills, the streets are narrow. Any extra traffic or any extraordinarily large events which these houses seem to involve, there's a danger aspect. If anything goes awry, any of these exotic animals get loose, it's not only a danger to the community, it's a danger to the animals themselves.
And I'll give you a little extra time because you really didn't need to sign a public comment card. You should have just been up here as staff. So.
And and I don't think I need to explain, Councilman Rue and I and his field deputies were involved. It took us 3 hours to deal with the elephant. It took us another, that was a Saturday night, I believe. I was on the phone with the field deputies and the lion incident last June that was carted up to this house in a cage through the Hollywood Hills. It not only creates, it's just so disturbing to see an elephant or a lion being towed through the hills of the Hollywood Hills. Also, as the prosecutor, I'm especially assigned to handle the cases that arise at the Hollywood Entertainment District, specifically the character CD vendors, the animal acts that are proliferating again at Hollywood and Highland. I prosecuted a case in June of 2014 involving a snake handler who had a 10-foot python. He didn't have a permit, and when Animal Services impounded the snake, he had a bag with 2 additional snakes. One snake was dead, the other one was dying. Now, my understanding is there are, at any given weekend, there are 4 different animal handlers at the Hollywood and Highland complex. They're all permitted. There's nothing that we can do except it just creates this, it's nothing is good going to come of it for the animals, certainly. I know that Santa Monica has dealt with this, and that's just as a neighborhood prosecutor, I don't take a position on what should be passed or whatever. That's just my experience thus far in the city of Los Angeles as a prosecutor.
Well, thank you. And obviously it points out that as we go through this process, we should look at what we need to tighten up in terms of the permitting process.
Good. Just for the record, just to comment on our neighborhood prosecutor, Mrs. Lawson. Thank you so much for all your work. And actually, earlier I said elephant. I don't know. I had an elephant on my mind. It was actually a lion. You're right. It was the lion.
Both.
Oh, was it both?
Mm-hmm. We've had
the issue
a
that we
lion
called,
and an
yeah.
elephant.
But I think the issue I called you on was a lion. But and thank you. And this is one of the reasons why we introduced this motion, so we could give you more tools to actually go after and prosecute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gus?
Yeah. With respect to Ms. Lawson saying there's nothing you can do, who's running the city? Of course there's something you can do. You don't permit it. You have a program. You know what you're doing, and you have a way for people to follow up, which is part of the problem, is that the city doesn't respond to these problems. And this is nothing new, by the way. 5-6 years ago in CD5, there was a Century City taco restaurant that had in front a spray-painted donkey. I wrote about it in the Daily News. I made a big stink of it at City Council. And how can all these years later you say, oh, gee, there's no process for this? I'll be glad to show you the article that I wrote. And I did bring to Mr. Koretz's attention. This is nothing new. So, I mean, how more outrageous does it need to be? A pink, spray-painted donkey out in the sun, by the way, without water, in Century City. How more blatant can it be? How can it be that this is just the starting process? What has happened since when that happened to this now? And somebody will get killed at Hollywood and Highlands. Thank you.
Heather Hyde, to be followed by Caitlin Lamb, Felix Helmstreet, and Matt Russell. And you could all come up. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Heather Hyde, and I've been born and raised in Los Angeles. I've been working for many years for the plight of not only wild but exotic animals for the use of entertainment in Los Angeles and worldwide. I wanted to come here to thank you for your time today to bring up the issue of the use of exotic animals in public spaces and for the use of entertainment. But I also want to see if you could consider the use of circus animals, wild animals in this ordinance. I know that this community is becoming more aware of what's going on and self-educating. I also feel bad for the children because by disguising the use of abused animals in entertainment is giving mixed messages and just not really addressing the issue of these animals that are confined and tortured and abused just for entertainment and the use of whatever humans want to do with them. So I wanted to come here and thank you again for bringing up this issue.
Thank you. Caitlin Lamb.
Hi, my name is Caitlin. I'm a Los Angeles resident. Thank you for working to protect exotic and wild animals in Los Angeles. I'm here to urge you to pass the broadest protection possible for these animals and for public safety. I'm appalled that lions, giraffes, and elephants are being brought to Hollywood parties, but I'm no less concerned about the circuses that are still bringing exotic animals to LA and forcing them to perform. For the few minutes of so-called entertainment, these animals endure a lifetime of misery with abusive training and confined to tiny cages on trucks or train cars traveling most of the year. Public safety is also an important issue to consider. Moving potentially dangerous animals in temporary cages in close proximity to the public has resulted in escapes, injuries, and death. These animals don't want to perform and as such are subjected to beatings used to keep them under control. The violence increases the fear and stress in these powerful wild animals. It is a recipe for disaster. When an animal escapes, it is the local police who have to respond. It can result in tragic shooting of the animal. Thank you.
Thank you. Felix Hemstreet.
Hi, I'm Felix Hemstreet, and I'm 9 years old, and thank you for letting me speak today. I think we should have no wild animals in circuses because the animals are being forced to do tricks that they don't want to do and they don't do out in the wild in these shows, and in between shows they're chained up or in cages where they can't or barely can turn around. Imagine like leaving your house cat in a travel crate for all day. That's how it would be. And why not protect animals in parties and in circuses? Because then you could help more animals. And this has to stop. And if you include circus animals in the ordinance, you can help. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Russell, and that's our last speaker.
My name is Matt Rozelle. I'm the campaigns director for Animal Defenders International, and I really appreciate that Councilmember Rue and Councilmember Kretz, you've taken up this issue again with exotic animals. Our organization has investigated one of these providers, Have Trunk Will Travel. In an 8-week investigation, we saw them behind the scenes viciously beating and shocking the elephants as a routine part of their training. And that's the problem, that LA Animal Services will not be able to fully investigate, because this kind of abuse always happens far behind the scenes before the animals ever arrive at a party or such things. There's also overlap between the exhibitors for these parties and the people bringing animals to circuses. Have Trunk Will Travel uses their elephants wherever they can make a buck, including circuses. And so, again, we are also urging the council to take a look at the broadest ordinance. Recently, West Hollywood and San Francisco have passed wide protections for these animals, and this is a great model for us here in LA. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further comments or questions, I would ask that we approve this motion and send it to Public Works, which I think is the committee to which it was double referred. And thank you, Mr. Rue, for bringing this forward. I'm going to ask, due to the lack of time, that we approve item 6 on consent, if there's no objection. And I think we're out of time. I don't think we can do item 9. So I'll ask. What was that? Oh, and if we can also include on item 6, Operation Freedom Sentinel, because that was a new name for a previous program. So to cover that under the Department of Defense as well as part of item 6. And we will continue item 9 to our first available meeting. And so we won't have speakers on item 9, and we are adjourned.